Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I will be presiding in the absence of both of our vice chairs, or rather of our chair, who is not yet here. I'm sure she will be here momentarily. I would like to thank our guests this morning from the Canadian Association of Newspapers, Bob Cox and John Hines, the Canadian Wireless and Communications Association, Mr. Bernard Lord, who has an advisor with him. I would remind our witnesses that the objective of this morning's study is a meeting of at least 10 sessions on the way Canadians, especially local communities, are informed on local events and regional events through news, radio, digital media, print media, on the coincidence of concentration of media ownership and the erosion of local journalism and the impact of new media. And the committee will, of course, present recommendations. The theme of the study is important. The subject is broad, is important. It is highly interesting. The MPs listening to you this morning are highly interested. There are local news sources that are in peril. And in each of your cases, you will have 10 minutes to give your presentation, and then we'll move on to 7-minute question periods for each party. Thank you very much. And Mr. Cox, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am Bob Cox, chairperson of the Canadian Newspaper Association, and with me is John Hines, executive director of the association. We are appearing on behalf of Newspapers Canada, which represents over 850 daily and community newspapers from coast to coast to coast. You've heard a great deal about news providers in trouble amid the fallout from the digital revolution of the past 2 decades. I will not add anything to that today. You know how traditional media has been disrupted. You know about falling advertising revenues. You know the impact this is having on many companies and how it threatens some TV outlets, newspapers, and others. You know the stories of individual media companies that are in trouble. What I ask you to do today is to reflect on the fundamental cause behind this situation and what you, as legislators who shape public policy, can do to set the table for the future so that there continue to be vibrant and healthy news media outlets serving communities across Canada. To start, I'd like to dispel some myths about newspapers, including some that are touted in headlines in our own newspapers. For starters, readers are not abandoning newspapers. The comprehensive national survey of readership continuously carried out by Vividata shows that 4 out of 5 Canadians read a newspaper weekly. Facebook cannot claim the same. Newspapers have hung on to their audiences, continuing to serve them in print and growing rapidly on digital platforms. Many of us have audiences as large or larger in the digital sphere than we do in print. Second, most individual newspapers make money on an operational basis. They generate revenues greater than their expenses. Individual companies have troubles with debt or other issues, but most of their papers are viable business entities. We continue to be the largest news media organizations in our cities and towns, presenting the most comprehensive coverage of events and issues and providing essential information and support to build and maintain the communities we serve. Nonetheless, we face uncertain futures. The reason for this is not simply the Internet. We are adapting to that and finding larger and more varied audiences than ever before because of it. The reason for the uncertain future is that the media economy has changed, and the laws and public policy measures addressing the media economy have not. We have a set of rules for what media looked like in the 1980s, not 2016. Yet these changes have affected all news outlets and should be of concern to anyone who cares about the democratic and economic health of our communities. Advertising dollars spent by businesses, governments, and individuals locally, regionally, and nationally used to circulate within a relatively closed media economy, supporting good journalism and the communities where it was produced. A local car dealer spent money with my company, the Winnipeg Free Press, to advertise and reach consumers. There was an immediate benefit to the car dealer, but there was also a secondary one. The Free Press employed people, reported news, and supported community organizations. That money went back into the Winnipeg economy to people who bought cars. The car dealer supported journalism in his desire to reach consumers, We supported vehicle purchases in our desire to serve readers. But this model is breaking down as companies increasingly reach consumers by using foreign media, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and the like. Advertising money is sent out of our communities and does not return. For the most part, these companies spend nothing to do journalism in our towns and cities or provide support to community groups. They employ hardly anyone in our communities, and the money is not recirculated. You'll notice that I did not use the term digital. The fact that these are digital companies is coincidental. In the past, Canada has reacted to such seepage of ad dollars to the U.S. by making it harder to have a U.S. TV station that showed only American programs but sold ads to Canadian merchants, or to have a U.S. news magazine sell Canadian ads into an edition produced south of the border. But we have not become alarmed by this much larger outflow of cash through digital channels. We should be concerned about it. We should not be concerned about the fate of any individual newspaper company or broadcast outlet or any other legacy media. But we should be concerned about the environment the news media companies operate in, so we do not end up with media dominated by foreign companies with few Canadian operations, an environment in which perhaps the only media that can continue doing serious public interest journalism is the publicly subsidized CBC. The CBC provides a fantastic service to this country, but in many digital areas it has set up as a competitor in the provision of news and information, creating an environment in which it is much more difficult for private enterprise to develop new, sustainable methods of providing serious journalism. In Great Britain, the government has insisted that the BBC cooperate with, rather than compete, with local papers. No such policy discussion has taken place in Canada. We have 4 areas that could be addressed to help ensure that there are multiple sources of local news in the future. Those sources could be old media that adapt and survive, or they could be new startups. The changes that I am talking about help everybody, not just newspapers. First, the federal government could lead the way by having a strategy to spend ad dollars in Canadian media. A decade ago, the federal government spent $20 million in newspapers. In the 2014-15 fiscal year, the federal government spent $357,000 in daily newspapers. That is out of a budget of $68.7 million. The government spent $13.9 million on the internet. Most of that money went to U.S. firms like Google. So why is the federal government spending millions of dollars in Silicon Valley instead of supporting Canadian media? Second, the federal government could find ways of encouraging Canadian companies to spend their advertising dollars here. This could be in the form of tax credits or penalties for using foreign firms. Non-Canadian legacy media are limited by the Income Tax Act, but this has not been applied to digital enterprises. Third, there could be further tax incentives to encourage investment in newspapers and other local media. This could take the form of tax credits for digital enterprises that provide public interest journalism or do digital development related to this. This could also take the form of tax relief to encourage reinvestment in newspapers. Right now at my company, for example, shareholders are not taking any profits so that we can pay down debt and reinvest in the business. But the federal and provincial governments are taking income taxes from any net profit we make. Why not suspend such taxes until money is paid out in profits to shareholders? Fourth, we need updated copyright laws to protect original work. Papers invest heavily in original journalism, which is then shared, reused, and rewritten by others, often for commercial gain, because the 2-decades-old fair dealing law does not take into account the ease of digital reproduction. If newspapers were compensated for their original content and the investment was protected for longer, it would be a significant boost to our revenues. I would also urge you to examine the existing support for community newspapers currently provided by the Canada Periodical Fund. The rules need to be updated to encourage production of Canadian content, not just subsidize the distribution costs of paid circulation newspapers. Many community newspapers are reaching broad audiences with free circulation, but they get no support from the fund. So that is it. I hope I have made it clear that newspapers are not asking for a public bailout. We are not. It is up to us to build successful new business models in the modern media world. What we need are the conditions that make success more likely. We are asking for a better environment that would help ensure that the vital role of newspapers, the role that they have played in this country for 230 years, is continued, regardless of what form they may take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox. And we now go to Canadian Wireless Telecommunications Association for Mr. Bernard Lord, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome, Mr. Lord.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. It is a pleasure to be here this morning to take the opportunity to join the discussion on the Canadian media landscape. I'm joined this morning with Kurt Eby. Kurt is our Director of Regulatory Affairs and Government Relations at the CWTA. The Canadian Wireless Telecommunications Association represents wireless service providers across Canada, as well as companies that develop and produce products and services for the industry, including handsets and equipment manufacturers, content and application creators, and business-to-business providers. Our goal, basically, at the CWTA is to enable more Canadians to use more wireless to do more, and that is happening. Consumer preferences have created our mobile-first world, where smartphones and tablets are the preferred choice to communicate, navigate, informed and be informed, shop, bank, work, collaborate, entertain, and be entertained. Le monde du sans-fil est en pleine croissance. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes.
The wireless world is in full swing, and Canadians are using it more than ever.
To be even more accessible, convenient, and easy to use. They count on ubiquitous advanced network connectivity to help keep them safe and secure, while they stay connected with family and friends and do more and more business. They need to trust that the personal and private information on their mobile devices is also safe and secure. And they depend on the wireless industry to continue investing and innovating so they can maximize the value of their wireless experience. One thing that we know is Canadians benefit from some of the best and fastest networks in the world. Une récente étude internationale.
A recent international study determined that Canadian networks are the second fastest of all networks in the world. Furthermore, Canadians are super users.
Users in the world. We currently rank 4th in terms of data consumption on wireless networks per user in the world. Indeed, Canadians' preferences for wireless is clear. In only 7 countries around the world does the average mobile connection use more than 1 gigabyte of data per month. Canada is one of those countries, and Canadians currently ranked, as I mentioned, 4th highest consumers of wireless data in the world at more than 1.5 gigs per month. The cumulative effect of more Canadians using smartphones and connected devices to do more is massive growth in overall data usage. The latest projections indicate that Canadian mobile traffic in the next 5 years will grow by 600%, 6 times more in the next 5 years. No other sector of the economy must consistently and constantly meet this level of demand growth similar to what is experienced in the wireless sector. Donc, ce que nous prévoyons, c'est une croissance.
What we expect is that there will be phenomenal growth when it comes to demand for wireless data in Canada.
This demand is driven by consumers. Consumers that prefer to consume all forms of media, including entertainment, news content, anytime, anywhere. Ubiquitous connectivity is changing the way Canadians are informed about what is going on in their country and what is going on around the world. Wireless service providers are facilitating this change, but they must also respond to the demand that is putting on wireless infrastructure, because we cannot support all this without more investment. And that is why Canadian wireless industry has invested more than $2.5 billion in capital expenditure each year since 2009. The doubling of total data usage every 2 years keeps the industry at a perpetual capital investment cycle. The industry has invested an additional $8 billion since 2014 to acquire the spectrum needed to expand and enhance wireless networks to meet current and projected traffic volumes. And I want to highlight this. This is $8 billion. This is just to have access to the radio frequencies. This does not add 1 tower, 1 antenna site, or connect 1 phone. That is just paying the government to have access to the radio frequencies. $8 billion since 2014. These investments obviously create jobs directly related to network expansion and enhancement and the ongoing delivery of advanced wireless services from Canada's service providers. In 2014, Canada's wireless industry generated over 134,000 full-time equivalent jobs and an overall economic benefit of $23.5 billion. Canada's wireless service providers will continue to make record investment to meet the demand of exploding data usage and ensure a consistent level of services for all Canadians. Strategic government policies can facilitate additional investment in wireless network infrastructure and support innovation, economic development here at home. Specifically, the CWA has consistently identified 4 priorities necessary to ensure the wireless industry can most effectively meet the demands of Canadians. And those 4 priorities are more spectrum, more towers and antenna sites, lower fees paid to government, and smart regulations. I want to highlight what we mean by smart regulation. By smart regulation, we mean that the federal government must maintain and defend its position as the sole regulator of telecommunications in Canada. Consumers, service providers, regulators, and elected officials are all better served by a proportionate and symmetrical set of federal regulations, rather than an asymmetrical and inefficient patchwork of different provincial frameworks. Businesses are also better served when they compete on a level playing field rather than facing disadvantage due to regional regulation. Now, there is one policy, and that's the main reason why we're here this morning. There is one existing fiscal policy that provides foreign companies with an up to 15% advantage over Canadian firms and indeed creates a barrier to doing business in Canada. Il existe une politique fiscale qui donne un avantage.
There's a fiscal policy that gives an advantage of 15% to foreign companies compared to Canadian companies.
Foreign suppliers of digital products and services, such as online news and entertainment services, music, movies, and software, are not required to collect or remit HST and provincial sales tax with similar Canadian firms are obliged to do. The competitive advantage given to foreign suppliers by this policy undermines Canadian investment and innovation by encouraging Canadians to spend more money outside of the Canadian economy to the detriment of Canadian suppliers and workers, as well as content creators, programmers, publishers, actors, directors, musicians, and all others in the creative community who benefit from a strong Canadian digital economy. Specific to this proceeding, this policy puts Canadian news and media outlets at a direct disadvantage relative to their foreign competitors. For instance, while a Canadian subscriber would pay HST on online subscription to the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, or the National Post, they would not pay the HST on subscription to some international press, for instance, the Wall Street Journal. The policy has been held over from when sales of such products and services were relatively minuscule, and effective taxation was more trouble than it was worth. Those days are gone. However, Canadians' insatiable appetite for digital media, movies, TV shows, apps, books, magazines, video games, and softwares make closing this tax loophole more important than ever. I can't imagine anyone openly promoting—
2 minutes, Mr. Lord.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I can't imagine anyone openly promoting a sales tax advantage for American-made cars. Imagine if you could buy a Camry made in Ontario and a Camry made in Kentucky. They're both identical cars, but the only difference, if you buy the one made in Kentucky, you don't pay sales tax, and you buy the one made in Canada, you would pay a 15% sales tax. Which car do you think Canadians would buy? Obviously, they'd buy the one made in Kentucky. It's the exact same situation we have in the digital space. And that's why we strongly believe that the government should ensure taxation parity among all suppliers of digital goods in Canada, removing the competitive advantage currently enjoyed by foreign firms. This would bring Canada's regime in line with the EU, Norway, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. I know I'm running out of time, Madam Chair, so I will simply say that wireless services also connect all Canadians, allowing collective participation in society and contributing to our shared national identity. Let's make sure there is a fair and level playing field for Canadian providers of digital services in Canada. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Lord. And we're now going to go to the question period, or the question and answer period. And this is going to be a 7-minute round, which means that the person asking the question and the people answering it are going to only have 7 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to be concise. And as you well know, what we're looking for is the fact that we want to see all Canadians have local access to their news. We want to ensure that that consolidation, we want to know what the impact of media consolidation has been on this and the effect it has on Canadian content. And we also want to know what the future will hold with regard to all platforms, including digital. So, thank you. And we will begin now with Mr. Vandal for the Liberals.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bob Cox. Ever since I was a teenager, my day begins with a coffee, or back then a juice, and the Winnipeg Free Press. And since I've been to Ottawa, it's the same routine, except I read the Free Press online. So I'm wondering if you could tell me about your digital experience, and we've, maybe I'll leave you some time to talk about the digital experience that the Free Press is having.
Sure. We have, like so many newspapers, we have paid digital environments so that we ask people to either subscribe to our digital service or do something which most newspapers don't do, which is we actually sell articles by the article. So we have what we call a micropayment system. If you want to read just one article on the Winnipeg Free Press website, you pay 27 cents. And it's a bargain, by the way, at 27 cents. We've had a fair amount of success. We sell literally thousands of articles a week on a per article basis. A lot of people thought this wouldn't work, but we've set up a payment system that makes it work. We have about a little under 5,000 people now who buy art on a per article basis. We also have about the same number of people who actually have full access subscriptions, so they're also paying subscribers. We set this up somewhat reluctantly. I was always an advocate of having a wide open digital service that was free for everyone to use, but what we found was that we couldn't attract enough advertising to support this. Our audiences really aren't big enough. No newspaper's audience is really big enough, not in Canadian environment. Google, Facebook, these services make money by repeating advertising hundreds of millions of times. Advertising rates have gone down a great deal online in recent years, in recent months even, so we can't do it. So we reluctantly went to a paid digital environment, and we've had a lot of success with it because there is demand for content. There is demand for local content. People do want to know about their local communities. Everyone has great taste like you, Mr. Vandal, and reads the Winnipeg Free Press, and there is a demand and they are willing to pay for it.
Unfortunately, not everybody. But I'm struck by your comments early on that the readers are not abandoning your newspapers and that most individual newspapers make money. Yet you've suggested that government should be spending more money in newspapers. So is it just the situation that you don't make the amount of money that you used to make and you'd like to bring it back to the old days, or?
Well, I can certainly tell you we don't make the money we used to make. However, I think that it's a question of where the line is going. If the line is steady and you can get a steady state and a sustainable environment, that's great. But unfortunately, we've seen ads going like this, falling off very quickly. Last year, our advertising revenues fell by about 10%. That's unsustainable. That continuing loss of advertising is unsustainable. And part of that is government advertising. Part of that loss has been government advertising. I don't think anybody's going into the newspaper business anymore to get rich. I think that there are a lot of owners in the newspaper business, such as the owners of the Winnipeg Free Press, who really see it as a business, yes, first, but also a public service, and they firmly believe in that. And what they would like to be able to do is to find a long-term sustainable model that is a successful business but doesn't make them a huge profit. So.
Thank you. I've only got 7 minutes, so I want to get in a few more questions. Is media concentration an issue we should be worried about in Canada?
No, I think the days of the big, bad, ugly newspaper company monopolizing media are long gone. I don't know why we would worry about tiny little newspaper companies, because they are tiny compared with big digital media companies. Just to give you an example, Postmedia is now valued at $10 million. That's the stock market value of Postmedia. Toronto Star is about $150 million. By comparison, BuzzFeed is worth more than $1 billion. Vice Media has a valuation of $4.5 billion. I mean, these are the monsters out there. These are the huge companies, the conglomerates that are actually a real concern. Newspaper companies are mostly just struggling to survive.
We've heard several witnesses talk about that newspapers are the main source of credible information, and they found that the quality of journalism found on online news sites to be questionable. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think there's some very good online news sites that have grown up as new models. I'll point to one that I'm sure you've heard of, which is allnovascotia.com in Halifax. It is a paid subscription service that provides local news. They don't give anything away. You pay on a monthly basis to get a very good news report every day. They have several thousand subscribers paying for this, and a successful small business model that resembles a lot of community newspapers in the past. Those kinds of models can grow up if the environment provides for that. If the environment makes it easier for that to happen, lots of those models can grow up. So you can have lots of credible online news sources. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't credible, and newspapers remain a reliable and trusted brand.
You had mentioned that 1.5 minutes. The rules that we have were set for the 1980s and not for today. Can you say more on that?
Well, I think that the biggest question is taxation, which we seem to both be talking about today. Really, it was the Income Tax Act was put together for a world in which there was TV and radio and newspapers. It wasn't put together for an era in which we have digital. There's a number of areas. Mr. Lord mentioned one. I mentioned others involving advertising. I mean, we were all worried about Time Magazine coming to Canada and taking advertising dollars away, yet we're not concerned about Google doing the same.
Okay. Copyright laws?
Yes, that's a complicated area, I realize. The biggest problem we have is the fair dealing provisions, which essentially mean that once we put it out there, we've lost control of it and we don't get anything back for it. If there was a way that people were reusing our material for commercial gain in an identifiable way, obviously it has to be an identifiable way, that we could then go after them, but we really can't. Once a newspaper puts something out there, it's out there and you don't get anything in return. So.
Thank you, Mr. Van Daal.
Thank you.
And now I go to Mr. Wall for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to pick up on the copyright laws because newspapers have no trouble having their journalists on TV and radio. So they write the story, you send it out, and then sometimes they're on before it even gets published. So there can't be both ways here. I mean, you're employing newspaper reporters, and then they turn around and spill the beans before your newspaper does. They'll do it on TV and radio, like I said. So you've allowed both. I look at it here, and you've allowed your own people to go on freelance.
Well, in some cases they're freelancing, in some cases they actually work for the publication, but in all cases they are the creators of the content. So a singer can go on the radio and sing, and go on TV and sing, and do anything they want with the content they have created. Newspaper journalists are in the similar position. I might note that a lot of journalists may be working independently, and what we're really looking for is control over content by the creators. That's really what we're looking for.
I think you've lost control, though. With the newspaper industry, your reporters have turned more into digital people, and they've turned more into radio and TV hosts.
Yeah, the newspapers really aren't simply printed things anymore. Newspapers are news organizations. We encouraged our reporters to go into digital. We insisted in many cases that they did. Many of them would have loved to stay in print and been able to, have long lunches and then file by 4 o'clock. But we want them in digital because the area that we cover is as a news organization, maybe digital, maybe print, and in fact is in most cases video as well. So the idea that there's TV and radio and print is kind of outdated. Now there are news organizations that are on various platforms.
Yeah. I just want to say, we had Transcontinental here at this committee a month ago, and when I mentioned that the flyers in the inserts in the newspapers is the revenue of the newspapers, I remember the gentleman kind of scolding me over that. Well, little did we know that Transcontinental yesterday sold all their newspapers in Saskatchewan. And the reason he probably scolded me is they were in negotiations with Star News. So here we've lost 30 jobs in Saskatchewan. Their printing press is down. They've sold the newspapers and they're out of Saskatchewan. So your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the large media companies aren't actually the best at owning newspapers, especially in small communities. I think one of the reasons why my company, which is called FP Newspapers, has been a success is because we're a Manitoba company. We have a few community newspapers, we have a couple of daily newspapers. We care about our communities, we live in our communities, and if something happens to the newspaper that affects the community, it probably affects my life too. So we understand it very well. I can't make excuses, and nor can I speak for any large company and the decisions they make, but they usually make decisions based on how much money they can make and whether they're making enough money and this sort of thing. And that isn't the basis really for all the decisions that are made about people like Roger Holmes, who bought the newspapers yesterday in Saskatchewan. He cares about communities. He's willing to invest.
I hope so. He bought them.
He's willing to invest. So let's make the rules better for people like him so he, who cares about those communities, can invest in them.
We wish him well. Mr. Lord, wireless users, like you said, are an all-time high in this country, and yet we pay the highest fees, I think, in the world.
That's incorrect.
Okay, so where are we in the world then for fees? Because everybody that has one of these claims they're paying more than they pay in the United States or Europe.
Well, I would refer you, if you want to refer directly to the United States, I believe it's the last report of the CRTC that indicated the CRTC does a market analysis every year, and our prices on average are lower than the U.S., according to the last study of the CRTC. One thing you have to keep in mind is service and quality of service is very different in different parts of the world. And what we have in Canada, we have among the fastest, most robust, reliable networks you can find anywhere. And in fact, the most recent study on speeds of networks shows that Canadians enjoy the second fastest networks of all the 190 countries in the world. So that's really good. So what you're buying is access to a network. And what we see in Canada is Canadians love using their devices more. And we are, recent study, where like that. See, it never stops. I couldn't time that any better. Thank you. Yeah. You know, we have staff listening to this, and they call in when it's time.
Yeah.
But what we have in Canada is we have the fourth heaviest users of data, and that's where it's moving. You know, these devices, I remember the first phone I bought was really to call, and then we started texting, and now it's all about data consumption. These are portable computers that we use once in a while to call. And the data consumption, we as Canadians are the fourth heaviest users of data online, and that's what you're buying. And we also like the most sophisticated device. If you look around this room and you go into most homes in Canada, Canadians love the best devices, the robust devices with a lot of memory, and that costs more. So when you package all that, that's the value we get. And what we know is we have more than 29 million subscribers in Canada, and they're consuming more than ever. But the one thing that we're concerned with today, and the reason we're here, and really what I'm saying is in support to what Mr. Cox is saying, is the fact that there is an uneven playing field when it comes to taxation.
I've heard that. Yeah, keep going. So you above everyone else in this room know that consumers don't want to pay more, but...
Absolutely. And consumers are right to look for the... Canadian consumers are smart. And they will go and they'll find the best value. And frankly, business owners in Canada are also smart. And if they can advertise the same product in a similar format and get a 15% rebate because they don't have to pay sales tax versus advertising on a digital format and pay a 15% or 13% sales tax, and they feel they'll get the same outcome, they'll take the one that costs them the less. If you're home one night and you can watch a movie and you can do it through a Canadian provider or you can do it through an American provider, and you're watching the same movie and it's the same price, $6.99, but one will charge you sales tax because they're Canadian, and the other one won't because they're not Canadian, which one are you going to pick?
Yeah.
Most people will pick the one that doesn't charge sales tax because they get the exact same product, the exact same service at the same time, the same experience. The only difference, they don't have the enjoyment of paying the sales tax.
Yeah, the GST or HST. I understand that. So you want government to tax them then?
Well, there's more than one option here. There's
What is the options then?
The option is either you tax foreign digital services or you untax Canadian digital services. That's the choice. That's a public policy position, but I think it's clear that we need to level the playing field.
How much if we don't tax Canadian?
Time's up, actually. Maybe Mr. Lord can just finish his thought. quick thought, Mr. Lord.
If we didn't tax these companies then in Canada?
We don't have that number.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Nantel for the NDP.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci beaucoup.
Thank you for being here this morning. I find this fantastic. It's a shame that Mr. Law doesn't have the numbers linked to that particular policy. I understand, of course, that everyone's trying to ignore this. Everybody's trying to avoid making a decision, but that is the reality. These international businesses offer their services under the table. It's called over the top, but really it's under the table because there's no tax. We blame housewives and mechanics who don't want to pay, who don't want to charge taxes, but those businesses are doing it openly. It's the same thing for everything that's virtual. This is a policy that the Canadian government has to really be firm with, must consult their peers internationally and make a decision because this is a serious issue. I'm pleased that you are here. I don't know how long. We've talked a great deal about you over the weekend. When it comes to somebody who can unite a lot of people, we have a lot of questions for you. Wireless internet services, as you say, everybody wants it more and more. We agree with that. However, at the same time, we all have a love-hate relationship with our provider, and in your group that you represent, there are people who are relatively difficult, who have very different behaviors, whether it be the ones who are real experts or go-getters, or they're new and they use pictures of animals. On the TELUS side, they've recently announced the end of limited data, unlimited data. You say Canadians are consuming more and more services over wireless internet, and yet, when it comes to unlimited data, that no longer exists. Ultimately, we have people using more and more data with networks that are bigger and bigger. There's more spectrum required to provide all that service, but it's not profitable, and Canadians will have to expect to pay more. Is that it? That's an excellent question. When it comes to the pricing practices, prices that are set and deals that are made available, every member of our association, whether they're associated or affiliated with the association, sets their own prices. There's absolutely no discussion amongst us on how or why a particular price or package is set up. The reality is that this is an industry that is evolving. I just want to explain how it's constantly evolving when we're talking about wireless. A few years ago, for Canadians, data use was relatively low. Finding somebody who used 1 gig in Canada per month was extremely rare, and yet the average is 1.5 gigs a month now, and it's rapidly increasing. If you look at the consumption of young people under 40 years old, it's rare to find someone who consumes less than 1 gig. The reality is that we're using this to do more. We use our devices in order to read the news online, to watch videos, to watch hockey games, to do research, to do business, and more, what's coming is that, I'll use an English term if you will allow, the Internet of Things. There will be more and more machine-to-machine connections, and that will create more data consumption. In order to have networks that are able to support that growth, imagine if we could find something that could satisfy our needs and say in 5 years that 4-lane highway will have to become a 24-lane highway. That's exactly the reality we're dealing with. Today's networks have to be 6 times better and bigger than they are now. When it comes to taxation and the example that you used of people who decide not to charge sales tax, you talk about mechanics and people who clean homes. That's a great analogy. We have a system in Canada that allows foreign companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, if you look at their value on public markets, we're not talking about mom and pop shops here. We're talking about very big companies who are able to sell their services in Canada without asking for sales tax. Often, you have indicated that you want your members to apply best practices, and it's the right thing to do. It's clear that the use of the networks that belong to Canadians is a business opportunity that comes with responsibilities. At that time, we will have to look as corporate citizens and private citizens what we want to do with this particular system. I don't want to blame you, but it's clear that it's the internet that's really changing the game, and everyone's scratching their heads and asking, what do we do? So I expect that we are going to have a broad conversation with all of the players. And Mr. Cox, you talked about the loss of advertising revenues.
Advertising market leaving away for social media and stuff. When I was a kid, I remember there was in the paper, there was sometimes called publi reportage, so kind of simile news, but advertising something. Mm-hmm. And isn't it exactly what Facebook is into when they are promoting stuff? Like even myself, I can promote something good I did on Facebook. Isn't it fake advertising or fake real stuff? Shouldn't we, is there any way to maintain in the consumer's opinion, oh, I'm being fooled here. I thought this guy was my friend who's actually selling me a Chevette.
Yeah, that's typically the name we use for that is sponsored content. You see a lot of it, even in larger newspapers, even the Globe and Mail, you'll often see sections that are really written by the advertisers, or certainly for the advertisers. And there's a lot of controversy over that. I know our newspaper hasn't gone into it to the same degree, but it's a large source of revenue. And what's happening is that newspapers and other media are so desperate for revenue or new sources of revenue that they've gone to this. Mm-hmm. And so it actually has threatened standards, threatened the ethical standards of journalists, et cetera, and of news publications.
Isn't this what this...
We're at 7 minutes, so maybe we can let Mr. Cox finish his thought.
Yeah, so basically, a lot of publications feel they have no choice, but really, you know, there's no standards about how this material should be identified. Should it be clearly an ad? Should it be clearly journalism? A lot of times there's confusion. So it's a very murky area right now, and it could use some cleaning up.
Thank you. And now we go to Mr. Sampson for the Liberals.
And welcome. Bienvenue ici ce matin. On apprécie beaucoup cela.
Welcome here this morning. We appreciate your presence, Mr. Lord. I have 3 or 4 questions for you, and we have 7 minutes. So I will try to manage our time well. As a former premier, you have a lot of experience as a decider. I would say that you went from decider to, and you're back in a decision-making role. It's an interesting subject. You talked about the problem of taxes. You are a decision maker yet again, and you have 2 years to wrestle with this problem. What are you going to do with it? My decision would be to solve the problem. That's the first decision that must be made. There has to be willingness to solve the problem. First of all, one must recognize that the situation exists, and today we have the chance to talk about it. It's not a question of blaming what was done in the past. This is all a matter of evolution. 20 years ago, the problem didn't exist. 10 years ago, it was starting to surface, but today, our world has changed entirely. As I mentioned, it's a mobile-first world. It's not just a digital world. It's a mobile digital world. So we've created networks. As Mr. Nantel mentioned, we've created networks that allow people from outside to sell things in Canada, and that's not a bad thing. But we have to make sure it's a good thing. But it has to be done on the same level. We can't have a taxation policy that disadvantages or creates a disadvantage for a Canadian company compared to an American or an international company. The first decision that must be made is we have to solve that problem, and then we have to decide how to solve it, and that becomes a little more complex. We need to solve the problem with the provinces as well, because sales taxes are provincial and federal. The option is to either increase taxation on products that are of foreign origin. You're a decider. Make a decision. What do you want? I want one or the other. I want a level playing field. If we look at other countries who have looked at it, whether it be the European Union, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, Norway, Australia, they've all chosen models to deal with that problem. Thank you very much. If I understand correctly, you represent wireless device users. How do we compare with other countries when it comes to wireless services? There's a whole industry that is growing in Canada. People who are content creators, mobile content creators. This is the case in traditional industries, for example, newspapers, which now offer their services digitally and through wireless applications. And they design applications for mobile devices. It's not just a matter of transferring a computer application. Content is managed so that it is easier to use and read on a mobile device, for example, a smaller screen. And we see that when it comes to news, when it comes to entertainment, and we also see it in business. One area that is very important is that it's a business tool, it's an economic tool, and it's an economic development tool. When it comes to the networks in Canada, they don't just allow more Canadians to see things on YouTube, even though Canadians are some of the largest users of YouTube and those who post and use YouTube. This is a tool that helps us in all aspects of our lives. And we see Canadians who want to participate in them. When it comes to taxation, we have to ensure that if a Canadian who is a consumer decides to buy a product online through a mobile platform, if they have to choose between a Canadian and non-Canadian product, they shouldn't have to pay 15% more just because it's Canadian content, because Canadians are playing by the rules. Very well, thank you. What do you do to encourage the expansion of wireless services in Canada? A lot. It's the first thing. The most important thing for our members is to continue expanding networks. And we see the demand that's going to be increasing over the next 5 years at 600% growth. We have to make sure that we can meet that demand. For that, there are two things. First of all, we have to continue to increase capacity where capacity already exists. Where there's already a service offered, we want to make it better. And where there's no service, we want to provide a service. So we have to increase the amount of territory that we serve, and where we already serve people, we want to increase capacity. So as a decision maker, how to make that service more affordable for Canadians today? You're a decision maker, not just a businessman. I love hypotheticals. People ask me those types of questions every day. What we have to understand is that the reality, and someone mentioned earlier that there's a love-hate relationship. I very much understand that idea. The price per unit is going down. How much it costs for 1 gig of data has gone down in Canada compared to what it was 5 years ago. But what's increasing is consumption. So the monthly bill for Canadians is going up. It's because they are consuming much more. It's like going to the grocery store and you fill your basket with more products than last week, and you say, but my bill is higher. The problem is that you consumed a lot more. That's the reality. So you're a decision maker now. Decision makers' goals is to make things more affordable. Well, what we can do is to not have too much regulation. We have to make sure that consumers and providers can make free choices that allow them to take risks and to take advantage of those risks. In Canada, we have a system that is very competitive. We have smaller providers, larger providers, but we have to keep in mind that even large providers in Canada are small compared to international providers. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sampson, very good. I think we've come to the end of this session because of the time limits. And I just wanted to ask one question, though, and Mr. Van Daal asked it earlier on, and it is about the quality of journalism and how does one ensure that, given that anyone can now post news online, how do we look at either A, encouraging journalists to be able to come and to stay, because you don't have to travel and live in small communities anymore. You can be in a small community and and cover all sorts of news. How do we get that to happen? How do we keep that moving forward, that sort of integrity of journalism online?
Well, again, it comes back to creating an environment, I think, where the old idea of the old community newspaper, where you had a family that owned a community newspaper, would live in a small town or city or whatever and run it and do it more for the love of telling people what's going on than anything else. I think if you can recreate that in the digital world, and there's lots of people who want to live in communities and who want to tell stories about their communities and who want to do it in a professional and reliable and responsible way, but they have to earn a living. The person who volunteers to write about their kids' soccer games or who posts things on Facebook or tweets out what they happen to have eaten for breakfast, those aren't the reliable sort of people who are going to provide information that communities need. You need an environment in which there can be a digital startup, say, that can attract enough revenue through some kind of business model, be it through advertising or through subscription service, that can serve a community. And if you do that, then you'll continue to have professional journalism in these communities, but there has to be an environment in which there are paid professional journalists, because otherwise all you've got is a rabble. You just have people talking, gossiping, and no control over the quality.
Thank you, Mr. Cox, and I want to thank both of the witnesses for coming today and for expanding on what we're hearing. And actually, the big issue here is Canadian content and how do we maintain that. So thank you very much. And now we will just break for a couple of minutes while one group of witnesses leave and the others come on. Thank you. Can we start the meeting?
You've had a chance to look at those notes I wrote for you.
Yes, I showed them to Jacques-François. We're about to begin. We have two sets of witnesses, Cogeco Inc. and Corriere Canadese. Each for the witnesses, you will each have 10 minutes to present. I will give you a 2-minute sort of cue when you have 2 more minutes left, and then we're going to go to a question and answer. So we will begin with Cogeco, Mr. O'Day, and Nathalie Dorval. For 10 minutes, please. You may begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to appear before the committee and to present Cogeco's point of view on local community media. My name is Louis Audet. I am the chair and CEO of Cogeco, and with me on the left I have Ms. Nathalie Dorval, who is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Copyright, who is going to be accompanying me throughout this presentation. Cogeco was founded by my father, Mr. Henri Audet, 6 decades ago. We made our first steps in the industry of media in 1957 with a television station in Trois-Rivières in Quebec. As we all know, the media industry has changed quite a bit since that time, not only in Canada, but throughout the entire world. Over the last 6 decades, throughout these 6 decades, Cogeco has embraced change and adapted its business activities to the new realities brought about by technological, social, and economic change. It is this ability to adapt that underlies the enduring success of our company, which provides employment for over 4,600 full-time employees. We are no longer involved in conventional over-the-air television broadcasting, nor are we involved in the print media. We do, however, have 13 radio stations in the province of Quebec. They are local radio stations, and we provide community television service to 32 discrete community channels in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. We also make our French language radio news service, Cogeco Nouvelles, available to more than 40 additional independent local radio stations in the province of Quebec. Our remarks today are therefore focused on broadcasting in the digital world and how local communities can still be served in this digital world. You have heard this from other witnesses, but I will repeat that the landscape has changed dramatically for traditional broadcasting media in the global digital age. Audiences continue to migrate to digital platforms for their information needs. Advertisers, unfortunately, continue to shift their advertising dollars to internet-based media, and Canadian consumers, particularly young people, are looking for more instantaneous, ubiquitous, and interactive ways of informing themselves, mainly over the internet.
What should we do or avoid doing in the circumstances? First, we need to recognize that the trend I've just described is irreversible. Second, we must focus our efforts on effectively transitioning our broadcasting media to the new operating models available in the digital world. And yes, that includes the production and exhibition of local television news and information programming. Third, we must avoid robbing Peter to pay Paul. For example, taking money away from the community television sector to subsidize the public and private sector traditional over-the-air local television stations. And fourth, we should stay away from direct funding of television news and information programming by the state. This idea would add to the risk of undermining our democracy. We made these points to the CRTC during their recent proceeding on local and community television in more elaborate submissions backed by detailed data available on the CRTC's own website. Our submissions to the CRTC are also publicly available on the CRTC's website, and you may find them of interest as a complement to our appearance before you today. In addition, courtesy copies of Cogeco's final comments and oral presentations at the CRTC hearings have been provided to the clerk of this committee. We pointed out that conventional over-the-air television stations in Canada are, for the most part, owned and operated by 4 large vertically integrated groups, mainly BCE, Shaw, Rogers, and Quebecor, who collectively control over 79% of all commercial television revenues in Canada. These large and very profitable groups, who are present on all traditional and non-traditional television platforms, have the financial resources to transition their local news and information operations to the new realities of the digital world. And they should be allowed to do that, to pool the resources from their various media and platforms, and required to provide local news components in the local communities that they are licensed to serve over the air. And as cord cutting intensifies, over-the-air broadcasting will take on added importance to reach all Canadians and foster a common cultural base. As for the public sector, mainly the CBC, it is for Parliament to decide whether its mandate should be revised as to specifically include the provision of local television news and information in both official languages, and whether the CBC's parliamentary appropriations are sufficient to support the fulfillment of its mandate, should it be so revised. This leaves only 19 small, independent, conventional local over-the-air television stations operating in small markets that need to transition to new operating models before and to avoid being forced out of business by declining audiences and advertising revenues. Since they are required by the federal government to vacate their over-the-air broadcasting spectrum, the federal government should provide them fair compensation for doing so out of the proceeds from the auctioning of the spectrum that will be taken away from them. We also presented to the CRTC earlier this year a plan to offer, through our community channels, professional local news programming in up to 7 local communities in the province of Ontario and 7 local communities in the province of Quebec that are without any local over-the-air television service. Our plan is based on our experience in North Bay, Ontario, where we've been providing local television news on the community channel since CTV closed the only local over-the-air television station in that community several years ago. We hope that you found this presentation useful and will be pleased to answer your questions to the best of our abilities.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Audet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Audet.
We go to the Corriere Canadese. I'm sorry, Joe, if I mangled that a bit. And we would like to go for 10 minutes. You could divide your time, or you can present in one 10-minute block.
Well, before we begin, first of all, thank you very much. Your pronunciation wasn't all that bad, and you're forgiven. Mr. Dan Montesano is accompanying me. He's the chair of the Community Advisory Committee Board, but I'll be doing most of the speaking. So without much further ado, Madam Chair and colleagues around the table, thank you for affording us the opportunity to enter into your deliberations regarding the state of some of Canada's cultural institutions, because I think that's what we're talking about, particularly as they relate to heritage, citizenship, participation in the development of our country. We are acutely aware that your decisions and your recommendations to government will have an impact on the survivability of quote-unquote local media, and with it, the continuance of iconic instruments for the promotion of our Canadian identity. This is so because the committee, as it has seen to date, knows that the financial stability of some of those institutions in the Canadian mosaic, perhaps most urgently the print media, is fragile. We speak at the Corriere Canadese for ourselves, but our experience is reflected in that of others, bigger and smaller, as you've heard already this morning. They, as we recognize that the federal government by its actions determines the successes or failures of many industries, including our own. Our submission may strike you as a plea for assistance. We don't apologize, it should. We are no less exempt from the vagaries of the marketplace than the bigger and larger enterprises like Postmedia in search of government allies. Now, before we make that plea, however, let us allow to present ourselves and some of our value-added contributions to the Canadian heritage. Now, some of the history of the Corriere Canadese and the Italian-Canadian community it both serves and represents in Canada will already be known to some of you. If so, please indulge us the repetition. The most recent Stats Canada figures place the number of Canadians who consider themselves ethnically Italian to be in the range of 1.4 to 1.5 million. That's about 4 to 5% of the overall population of Canada. Now, just under 1 million of them live in Ontario, and about 800,000 of them in the Golden Horseshoe. Of this total, approximately 250,000 still use Italian exclusively, primarily, or frequently during the conduct of their daily business. These are relevant stats because we're talking about the nature of Canada and the communities that make up its whole. The Corriere Canadese is Canada's only Italian language daily newspaper. It has been reporting on and commenting on the history of this demographic since 1954. It also takes editorial positions on the role and administration of government at all levels and jurisdictions. Sometimes it does this in English. The Corriere Canadese remains the third longest surviving daily in the GTA, behind only the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star. Incidentally, the Corriere Canadese receives no federal government assistance. It is worth noting that as a demographic and as a medium, we do not fit into the funding compartments reserved for either the two official languages or for First Nations. And yet, Italian Canadians have been a part of Canada from its first documented contact with Europeans. Giovanni Caboto, or as some of you know him, John Cabot, was the first recorded European to come to Canadian shores. There have been others, but he's the first recorded one. In 1497, under the commission granted to him by Henry Tudor when he landed in what has become Bonavista, Newfoundland. From then until now, Italians have played a role in the building of the country they now proudly call their own. It is a rare community or industry in Canada that does not feel their presence, from the former steel and mining towns of mining industries in towns like those in Sydney to those in Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, Winnipeg, and Trail. The same can be said for the some 350 forestry lumber-dependent towns everywhere across Canada. So also for the agricultural and the agro-production centres anywhere from southern Ontario westward. In transportation, both in the CPR and CNR relied on an Italian labour force, much of which stayed beyond the rail construction phase and became builders of communities from Vancouver to Kamloops to Canmore to Red Deer, Thunder Bay, GTA, Montreal, and Halifax. Today, they're a significant player in the auto parts industry of southern Ontario. Everywhere, they have been a model for Canadian multiculturalism, even before that model became enshrined in law in 1971. In fact, since 1954, the Corriere Canadese has been able to tell the story of their and our need to promote integration, participation, the promotion of diversity, along with the benefits that these accrue to Canadian social values. In every part of Canada, their children are the first to seek out alliances and partnerships outside their own community in order to promote the interests of the whole. As my colleague said a few moments ago, it is an essential element of the democratic aspect of Canada. Perhaps there are no clearer examples of this than the immediate past presidents of the Canadian Labour Congress, the National Council of Business Issues, now the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, and the founding president of Service Canada, all of them scions of that integrated community in Canada. But there are other numerous sterling examples of Italian-Canadian leadership in pension funds, philanthropy, food services, academia, the arts, foreign affairs, and so on. But back to Corriere Canadese. It used to be fiscally equipped to tell those Canadian stories of success and the values they represent. We would like to continue to do that and to maintain that all-important connection to Europe and Italy in particular. Italy is now a significant Canadian trading partner and one likely to become even more so if the CETA is ratified. However, as with our English language counterparts, our revenue stream is challenged. You've heard that this morning. Consequently, our ability to reach into the communities in the outer reaches of Canada's vast geography are severely limited. We now focus on the GTHA, where we can generate subscription revenue, single copy sales, and limited, though relatively consistent advertising. We consider ourselves a job creator, an incubator for the creative arts, and a vehicle for reaching out to the Canadian citizenry. Everything we do is generated, produced, and distributed in Canada. But our paper is not distributed free of charge. It costs money to manufacture product. The Government of Canada can be very helpful if it so chooses. It's a major league advertising presence because it needs all vehicles to inform the public on matters of importance to all Canadians. Nonetheless, the department that coordinates the ad buys for the purpose of informing the public about government activities actually excludes the Corriere Canadese completely from those ad buys. It claims, and I paraphrase, that the Italian community is not a target of its communication strategy and that at any rate the community is serviced by mainstream media. How does it know? Just like that, 5% of Canadian society disappeared from government communication strategy, and with it, all of its contributions this demographic makes towards sustaining our society, our economy, and our governing apparatus. A little bit like Mr. O'Day said about the local communities everywhere around Canada. Poof, they disappeared. Somehow it was deemed absorbed, assimilated into another. How? Ironically, the mainstream press in our market complains of precipitous loss of readership. So what are they reading? Please understand that the annual government, the annual...
Less than 2 minutes, Mr. Volpe.
Okay, annual Government of Canada ad buy is not insignificant for us. Of the $100 million spent last fiscal year on a per capita basis, some $4 to $5 million would have been spent through our language media. It's gone somewhere else. Even if one were to accept the argument, and we do not, that only $8.5 million was spent on print, that still represents about $425,000 for an Italian language press in Canada. For an enterprise like ours, which has 11 employees and is responsible for an additional 10 FTEs, that represents a difference between survival and additional employee attrition. The Corriere Canadese also receives no share of the ad buy allocated for online advertising, although our nascent online edition receives about 85,000 hits per day and receives over 100,000 unique visitors per month. And we think it would be good value for our money and for Canadian taxpayers. Furthermore, Corriere Canadese is shut out from any direct grants and contributions under the Aid to Publishers program. In last fiscal year, this program distributed approximately $75 million of our taxpayer dollars to qualified applicants. Yet it is virtually impossible for us to qualify. Because we're classified as third language, we are relegated to periodical section, and we are automatically disqualified because we publish every day.
Mr. Volpe, thank you. Your time is up, and perhaps during the question period, you can bring in some of the other issues you were trying to bring in.
Thank you.
And so now we begin our question, and we start with Mr. Button for 7 minutes.
It's 7 minutes, Madam Chair?
Yes?
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous tous.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being here today. In order to enlighten us with regards to the study, my question will be for Cogeco. We talked about the taxation file with experts who appeared before you, and you referred to it. It didn't come up in your presentation, but in your 2015 report, you referred to the fact that those who are migrating from cable to internet programming like Netflix represents a risk factor for your business. And those services are not regulated under the Broadcasting Act in Canada. I would like you to talk about that risk factor And I would like your recommendations based on what was in your report. Certainly, Mr. Breton. I think that the first observation that must be made to respond to your question is as follows. Throughout the entire world, democratic countries are not regulating content on the internet because they understand that it is a danger to democracy and the free circulation of ideas. We do not like the decision made by the government of Quebec to exclude certain internet gaming sites, to make them illegal, and to force us, as internet service providers, to block access to them. The problem is that every file that one faces has a good reason to exist as it does. If we go from one subject to the next, we are going to be eventually engaging in censorship. That means countries don't intervene. To respond directly to your question, I think that nothing would prevent Canada from establishing a structure that would lead to normal taxation, to tax goods and services, for example, provincial sales tax. That could be legitimately implemented, and that would be a good first step. From there, if the government were to say that stakeholders who want to play in our space will have to contribute to the production of Canadian content, that would be another solution. I think the first thing we need to look at, however, is taxation. The government must have the taxation powers it needs, as it does for any other provider of goods or services throughout the country, regardless of what good or service is sold. It's a matter of fairness, as you said. It's a matter of fairness based on what you're saying. Yes. My second question is also for you. The CRTC requires that 5% of your revenue be sent to the distribution of local Canadian content. That can also serve to support community television. You have 32 community television stations in Quebec and in Ontario as well, I think? Yes. I'm interested in that. In my riding, there's many local television stations. There's 3, in fact, and it's very important. It's listened to quite a bit. They even present the deliberations of municipal council. Those stations are highly present. Does this model work for you? What are your observations? We're involved in community television for many years now, almost 50 years now. It's something that we know well. We are rigorous when it comes to respecting the regulatory framework in place. We've been congratulated for it several times. During the hearings held by the CRTC last fall, we offered to change some of our stations, our local community television stations. We offered to change them in order to add broadcasting local information when there was no local radio broadcaster. So we're talking about a local television station that is in service. As we did in North Bay when CTV decided to close its station there because it was not profitable. Thank you very much. My last question. Obviously, everything often depends on access to broadband. You mentioned earlier that your local radio stations, people are turning towards the internet more and more, and you've heard about the $500 million investment made by the government in the budget in order to expand access to internet throughout the country. In order to partly resolve that problem, how do you react to that? And how do you fit into that model? We made comments to the CRTC a few weeks ago on that very subject. We recognized 3 types of problems. The first type is where communities do not have access to good service, but they're not too far from main centers. In our opinion, those communities require help in order to build networks when it is not profitable to do so. And that could be done as part of that $500 million that you mentioned, even though its management should be reviewed. When it comes to our company, the first $300 million that was offered under a previous administration, it was essentially impossible to access it in order to expand services for communities where offering service was not profitable. The second case is communities that are not well served, who are also very remote. Not only would it be worthwhile to try to draw on that $500 million in order to build where it's not profitable to do so, but it would also be worthwhile to have an operating subsidy for those who wish to get involved in that particular situation. The third scenario.
We've exceeded the 7 minutes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, 30 seconds. This is important.
It's more than 30 seconds. We've exceeded it by 40 seconds. So I'm going to move to the next question, and that's Mr. Maguire for the Conservatives. You can make that point later when you get another set of questions. Thank you.
You can do it right now, Mr. O'Day.
Thank you. The third case is for Canadians who are unfortunately are not the most economically advantaged citizens. And in that particular case, so they may live in communities that are well served, but they may not afford the service. And in that case, we have advocated a telecom stamp system that would be initiated by the federal government to allow these people to participate in the digital age in a way that ensures that the subsidy goes towards the use that the government would seek.
Thank you. I was most interested in your, well, a couple of the things, the 4 items that you put in about what should we do. Can you just explain, or expand, I should say, a little bit more on the third and fourth ones? The fourth one is, just if you could explain to me, we should stay away from direct funding of television, news, and information programming mandated by the state.
Well, of course, here it's hard to encapsulate the thought in one sentence, but I guess what we're trying to get at is you already have a CBC, which, by the way, does a fine job, in our opinion, of reflecting Canadian values and reflecting news and information from a Canadian viewpoint. So they're doing an excellent job of that. The problem arises if the federal government starts subsidizing every source of news. Then we submit, you may not agree, but we submit that brings us a step further to state control over news, and that is, that's the plague. So that's the point we're trying to make with that sentence.
Okay, and thank you. I'm also most interested in your last number there. If you could expand just a little bit on what you were doing in regards to the North Bay model, I think it would fit into Brandon, Manitoba pretty well.
Thank you. Well, essentially what we did there is when CTV decided to shut its station, we set up, it's a small team. It allowed us to cover local news in North Bay. Of course, we didn't have to provide international or even provincial news because it was already provided by networks. But insofar as local news, as the community was local news deprived from an electronic standpoint, we stepped in and we did it by creating a news studio and having a few people attend local events and reflect them once a day around, I forget if it was 5:30 or 6 o'clock, for half an hour. This has worked extremely well. The community has been delighted, and we are prepared, and I think a lot of cable operators would be prepared to extend that to other localities. We're able to do it with, shall I say, frugal means, but still, it's there and it's a valuable service.
And so this is in areas where you're already broadcasting?
Yes, we're present in 32 of them, but what we have proposed to do is deploy that service to 7 communities in Quebec, 7 communities in Ontario, where there are no local television stations currently in operation. I could provide you the list if you wish.
No, well, thank you. That's what I was getting at in regards to Brown. I guess the other one is for Mr. Volpe. The last comments you made were disqualified because we publish every day. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, the program allows for third language publication and local publications, but it excludes dailies. We're a daily, even though we're a third language. We're essentially a community paper. We're a much larger community paper than most others, but we can't qualify. And that brought us essentially to ask for a presentation, in part because we agree with Monsieur Audet. It's not only a question, as Mr. Bertrand said, about equitability, but it's also an equilibrium in a marketplace. And the government, through its decisions, can establish an equitability, but it can also reestablish equilibrium, especially as it relates to revenues and through its participation in that revenue stream.
I'm going to share it with Mr. Waugh.
I think you know where the problem is. The pie is here, right? I mean, you're a third party on this, so the English and French will get the most, and then you're in with the rest of them. And with immigration, we're seeing more and more different languages come into this country. So what is the solution? I see here at the very least provide us with GST exempt. But when I say how much is that to the government that wouldn't get, nobody has that figure.
Well, the government already makes substantial contributions to the marketplace, and it does so willingly when it makes its ad buys, or when you've heard others say what they do is they tax some and not others. I think the presentations this morning were pretty explicit. They said bring equitability back. Yeah. You don't want to tax everybody, but you don't want to tax heavily everybody, but at least tax those who come from outside our borders to make revenue from within our borders at the same rate that you would tax us. Or, as I think you heard someone else this morning say, make us get some equitability here in terms of the way that the GST is applied, or the HST in Ontario. If it doesn't apply to these who come into our marketplace to take away the revenue stream that is afforded to us by advertising, at least follow the example that's being followed by the Italians and the French today, that they're going after Google and Facebook in order to get a more equitable income from the taxes that they appear to be able to avoid. For example, Google invoiced in Italy $14 billion in revenues last year and paid $11 million in taxes. Now, how does that help anybody's revenue stream, including the government's? And if that's an action that's replicated here in Canada, and I think a presenter before us made that case, said at the very least balance off what you're going to do. Now, how can you do it? You can tax them and therefore increase the government revenues differently, or you can not tax us in order to give us a little bit more of a competitive advantage. There's only two ways that we pay taxes, HST, GST, and the other one is the payroll taxes that everybody cannot avoid.
Thank you, Mr. Volpe. If you hold that thought, maybe someone will give you a piece of the action a little later on. So we go to Mr. Nantel for the NDP.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all four of you for being here this morning. I think it's very clear. We're constantly talking about it, but I think there's a certain amount of coordination that has to occur at the international level when it comes to taxation and tax policies surrounding the activities of international businesses that sell virtual content. It's the same type of issue that would benefit from an international roundtable like the one that we saw about tax evasion, Starbucks, the price to pay. I think that it's a subject that is something that deserves attention from all participating countries. I think that Cogeco is an interesting player in Quebec when it comes to the broad questions. You are a small giant who's very solid, who has chosen its activities. If I am not mistaken, you have desisted from television. That means that you're involved in sectors that are less affected by all that, and I congratulate you. It's a great way to manage your assets. Can we say, I have a question for you, when it comes to posting, you know, the billboards, is the billboard market going up or down? As you know, we have a billboard business line, which we sold last January, essentially because we came to the conclusion that the possibilities for growth in that particular market were difficult, and the prospects for us to extend our activities geographically had become nearly impossible because big players were valuing opportunities over their market value. For example, CBS of this world, who look at a billboard and pays too much for it, taking into account the market price. Curiously enough, it's not American companies, it's Canadian companies. So essentially, your investments are in radio, cable broadcasting. In radio, you have the biggest players. In Montreal, for example, it's very clear. On a regional level, what are advertising revenues like? Because we identified that as one of the essential points when it comes to covering local news. Advertising. What's going on with your advertising revenues? I think in Montreal, with Rythme FM, I'm imagining that things are going well. Yes. Let's say that the advertising market for radio in Canada is relatively stable. It's stabilized at about $1.4 billion of revenue, and it oscillates a little bit between every 3 or 4 years. Radio benefits from the fact that given it's an activity that affects people's ears and not eyes, it hasn't been replaced by the internet. That's an advantage that that particular medium has. I would say that regional markets are neither better nor worse than the Montreal market. However, it's clear that there's more volume in Montreal than there would be in the regions. I would say that the situation in the regions is different than that of Montreal and Quebec. It varies. There's a lot of investment. Recently, we saw movements in the market, and you had a secret weapon in radio, which was the program director. When it comes to economic resources, I think that cable broadcasting is an interesting venue because you're not as involved in the content as other competitors. In the United States, if we set aside the idea of cultural protection, which is proper to the Canadian market, in the United States, what are the practices that should be imitated? For example, if you're involved in the markets there, what good practices should we be adopting ourselves? The first thing I would say, and I'm not the one who's talking, it's our operators, our staff in the United States who is saying this, who is saying that your regulatory framework set up by the CRTC and Let's Talk TV, breaking programming packages into smaller units, is good for your industry. And on the American side, we would like to benefit from the same advantage. So Canada acted when it came to the regulatory framework. and succeeded in establishing a system that is currently being tested right now, being tested in the sense that the economic impact is still being felt. If you will allow, Mr. Audet, I don't want to contradict you, but when it comes to protecting our cultural diversity, that's not necessarily a good idea. In the United States, it's a good idea. They're not worried about protecting Francophone culture when it comes to programming. Well, listen, that's an excellent question. The American model is a model to avoid. There's retransmission fees. Those are imposed on local television stations, which means that the costs of programming in the United States for consumers at the end are much too high. In Canada, I think we have succeeded. We'll see over time because it's only been 2.5 months, but we're moving towards an environment where we're going to have high-quality programming available to the biggest number at a more reasonable cost. You are right to emphasize that throughout the process there are marginal players who may no longer be able to meet their operating costs. So that's possible. In that sense, diversity could be impacted.
And now we go to Mr. Bousson for the Liberals, 7 minutes.
Buongiorno, mio marito è italiano. Alors, comme mon mari est italien,
As my husband is Italian, I understand that the Italian community is very important. I recognize that.
As you can guess, our holiday meals have a lot of languages around the table as we go back and forth. So I recognize also the importance of having those languages represented and accessible in our media for the various communities. I wanted to thank you because you gave a great overview of the contributions of the Italian community in Canada. And I was wondering, we've had a chance to speak to members of the Punjabi press, the Ukrainian press, and ethnic media. And some of the themes that were coming out were about the fact that different ethnic communities were not having their stories well represented in mainstream media. And so I was wondering if, from your perspective, looking at the Italian community, how well are Italian Canadian stories being represented in mainstream media? And do you have any examples of the types of stories that perhaps mainstream media is missing? Just why it's important to have an Italian voice?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, it's important for one very essential reason, and that is that the government of Canada is actually playing in the market. It takes money and it distributes money. It conducts programs, whatever the government program, that it informs its citizenry about their efficacy. And so what happens is they nurture community and involvement by redistributing some of those taxes in that environment. So many of us, including us in particular, we're excluded from that story. We can't participate in the developing of the story except through an electoral process, but then we can't participate in having any elements of our community being represented in the way some of the decisions are made and how they're affected. So for example, you mentioned your husband and the family, etc. These are great elements, not just of an Italian community, but of a community that's integrated into the Canadian environment and is infusing it with a different character, a diversity, which is a common term that people use today, a diversity that's making up the Canadian whole. I just happened to meet one of my students, a former student that used to be a teacher at one time. He survived my process. He's now the president of OMERS. That is one of the biggest, most significant investors in Canadian infrastructure anywhere. And the biggest impact on his life are like those dinners that you talk about and the experiences that are brought into those dinners. I don't want to make it schmaltzy and diminished. The man's a genius. But he's absorbed all that is Canada, and he has his own imprint. And that's a story that very few people are telling. We'd like to tell it. He's just one of many. Now, whether he's Italian or anybody else, I mean, if you come from the GTHA, chances are, I think it's 53%, you weren't born here. And yet these are all Canadians whose stories have to be put into the telling of the story of what Canada is, what it represents, where it's going. You know, from an economic point of view and a trade point of view, the governments of Canada, irrespective of their stripe, are reaching out all over the world to try to make the Canadian presence felt and to get revenue from a trade that sells the made in Canada product. Well, we're a made in Canada product. We tell the stories, the single elements of that jigsaw puzzle that is Canada. We just want the government of Canada to recognize that we're there. And it's a small contribution. You've heard the bigger players that say, look, you're not spending money, and by money that you're spending, what little you're spending, you're giving off a message. The message is don't advertise in the Canadian market, advertise with somebody else. Well, what are big advertisers? I noticed that Monsieur Nantel said, you know, l'affichage, you know, you get the big signs. Where do they go put their signs? They go put it on an American network. They go and do it with an American or a multinational company. They don't do it with a Canadian company. Sooner or later, that Canadian community, small or large, is going to be diminished in its ability to be able to tell the Canadian story. We're an example. I could give you a litany of achievements of Canadians of Italian background here in all aspects of research, whether it's medical science or technology, whatever. But, you know, that's why we exist, because people want to hear that story.
All right. It's interesting because I have heard it come up time and time again about government ad purchases and how ad purchases have changed or moved around. And one of the questions that I have when we're looking at that, really what we're looking at is different forms of media requiring other supports or finding new funding sources. I'm wondering if when we're talking about government ad buys, we're actually having a different conversation about what are subsidies that are available and if we have to be looking at new kinds of subsidies. Just because advertising choices are based on advertising, it's a business decision of a sort, perhaps. Is it more that we need to be finding new ways to support communities, not necessarily talking strictly just about ads?
Well, it's the advertising. It has a consequence of essentially helping the economic viability of the entity that receives the advertising. But government advertising is different from private industry advertising. There isn't a return on investment component associated with government advertising. The return on investment is the information that is disseminated to the public and the absorption of that. So it's a different calculus.
Yeah, it's just part of the reason why I'm asking the question is because I'm wondering, when I hear about that, my question seems to be more that, is it not that what we need to do is find other ways to provide supports to media and different ways to disseminate government messages, but that really focusing on the government ad pie alone might be taking us down the wrong path, is my concern.
I gave four separate indications in my presentation about where the government can be involved. The ad buy is one. It makes a big difference to us. It doesn't make very much difference to some of the big companies, quite frankly. You know, you had one, because I know the president well, Paul Godfrey. He said, you know, here we have $690 million debt. I mean, you know, getting $450,000 or $1 million in government ad isn't going to make a big dent in his debt. It'll make a big difference to organizations like our own, a huge difference.
I will leave you with that thought, and then I think we could try and squeeze in 2 3-minute rounds in the second round, and I will start with Mr. Wall for the Conservatives, and then I'll go to Mr. Reagan. But I'm going to be really rigid about your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be quick. I want to congratulate you, Mr. Audette. This has been a doom and gloom committee we've heard for the last 3 months, but I'm looking, you've embraced change, and that's what's kept your company above everyone else. And I want to talk about that because in media, it's always changed for the last 100 years. And around the table, some of them don't want to change, but I want to say you have changed.
Well, it's not always easy.
No, it isn't. I agree.
But yeah, we embrace change because we believe that if you don't embrace it, then it will short circuit you and you will disappear.
Yep.
So we've tried, as soon as new technologies were available, we've tried to harness them to, you know, for the health of the company and our customers. And we've had some luck along the way. That, you know, can't discard that either.
Yep.
And it's clear that for more traditional media right now, it's really tough.
Yeah, I just want to say, because we got, like the Madam Chair said, a couple of minutes here, we don't need a big staff in North Bay. You know, you can do it with 4 or 5 people. You can do that in Prince Albert, you can do that in Yorkton, and we never have talked about that. You know, in the community television that you've brought to North Bay when CTV left, you don't have to upstaff it. You just need to provide a reasonable service, if I can say.
That's correct, and it can be done inexpensively and with a level of quality that is satisfactory to the community.
Yeah, how many would you employ in North Bay? 4 or 5?
Oh, I don't even know myself. 3, 4 probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that model across this country works. And unfortunately, big is not necessarily the best for the industry, if you might mean.
Well, we've been operators of local TV stations. A full-fledged station, as small as it may be, is a heavy operation. It employs at least 25 people, sometimes up to 50. So, of course, it's a very expensive undertaking if the advertising is not there. But if it's a 3-4 people affair, then the basic information service can be provided, and we do it amongst the funds that are earmarked by CRTC for community involvement.
And I would say those communities appreciate that.
Well done, Mr. Wall. Extremely well done. Thank you. Now for Mr. Reagan.
Chair, just a small correction on Mr. Volpe's presentation. Giovanni Kubota actually landed in Newfoundland, not in Canada. Actually in the home of the Beothuk people, but it doesn't really matter because Canada had the good fortune of joining Newfoundland back in 1949, and you're all very welcome. I want to get on to the point of federal advertising. The federal government, you know, follows the people, and one of the things that I found in my campaign was the number of people who are on Facebook, who are online, and that's where we want to follow people. And the fastest growing online market is in seniors, for instance. I mean, of those 75 and over, 5% online in 2000, but 27% of them online in 2012, half of them on Facebook, which is not a surprise to me, and over 1/3 of them are on every day. And an interesting note, actually, there are more people 75 and up doing online gaming at about 36%, 27% for baby boomers. So huge just among seniors online presence. So that's just Facebook alone when you look at it. And so on that note, I mean, and considering that the federal government is going to, you know, follow where the people are when it comes to its advertising, what is your online presence and what sort of growth have you seen there?
I don't disagree with what you said. Your observations are bang on. We divide our market into 2 parts. First of all, there's the demographic that actually still reads. You know, read a paper. You have to have something tangible in your hand. Someone who wants to have something to look at in the morning, kind of give them a summary of what happened the day before, where things are going, and then conduct their discussions over the course of the day and then recycle themselves. The other component is something that, and I guess I took a leaf out of Mr. O'Day's book. You know, you've got to update yourself, otherwise you're going to be lost. We decided to go online. So I gave you an indication that we have over 100,000 unique visitors on our site on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and our hit rate is phenomenal for what is essentially a small slice of the Canadian demographic. We intend to continue to promote that, and that's why I said earlier on, when the Government of Canada is doing its ad buys, and I see an ad buy, as Madame said, perhaps as a subsidy too, if you want to reach the people that you're going to be representing or that you do represent, we're as good a vehicle as any other vehicle. It's simply because more and more people I wish you hadn't said baby boom area in the same breath as seniors, because I'm a baby boomer and I didn't like the second part of that definition. So, but yeah, they're becoming more and more accustomed to actually reading things online as opposed to just doing the gaming.
Big time.
I want to thank our witnesses for taking the time to come and present to us, and we need to get into business right now, so I would give everyone a minute for us to say goodbye, and let's get on with our business quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Really, the part of this meeting that we wanted to talk about is we need to discuss that we must study Bill C-210 if it passes the House today. As you well know, Bill 210 is Mr. Bélanger's bill, and it should pass the House today. And if it does, we need to be very quick in dealing with this piece of legislation. And now, due to health considerations, the mover of that bill or the author of that bill is unlikely to be able to attend committee. He is also not going to be able to entertain questions from the committee. As you all know, it's a very small bill. So I was hoping that we would be able to dispatch this bill on Thursday and then report it to the House on Friday and be able to get that done. So what I'm telling you is that there is no need to talk about witnesses or anything because the mover of the bill will not be able to be here. Thank you, Mr. Van Dal.
I agree, Madam Speaker, so I'll move that this committee dedicate 1 hour at Thursday's meeting to discuss Bill C-210.
Thank you. Is everyone in agreement with that motion? Mr. Van Loon?
Madam Chair, with the greatest of respect, we've actually spoken with individuals who would like to appear as witnesses. I think it is important that we give people an opportunity to speak to this. This is a matter of changing a significant symbol of the country. And I recognize that Mr. Bélanger has challenges, and I have no problem with him not appearing as witness. I would like us to explore the possibility of providing him some written questions that he could perhaps respond to in writing to us. I think that might be a reasonable way of accommodating his circumstances. But certainly I think that in view of the fact that I appreciate his circumstances, but this is the national anthem that belongs to all Canadians. They all sing it, and people have views on it. And I think it's important that they be afforded the opportunity to appear here as witnesses, if at least some, to represent a perspective other than that, certainly the perspective of maintaining the anthem that we have had for many, many years.
Knowing that we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Van Dal, I wanted to just give a quick response to you, Mr. Van Loon. We were in discussion with Mr. Bélanger with regard to him, even if he was not able to present, to entertain questions and to give us the response in writing. That was about 10 days ago. Since then, things have worsened, I think, and I don't believe that Mr. Bélanger will even be able to respond to questions in writing that is sent to him, I think that is becoming an impossibility. So putting that into whatever we're discussing here with regard to this bill, and if you still choose to add possibly an amendment to the 1 hour discussion of the bill, we could talk about that. But right now, the bill says for Mr. Van Dal that we set aside 1 hour on Thursday next to discuss Bill 210. So, any discussion on Mr. Van Loon? Would you like to?
I would certainly move that we afford at least one meeting.
Yes, one full meeting.
One full meeting for an opportunity for witnesses to appear, both in support or to provide comments on why they wish the national anthem not to be changed, and that we provide names of such witnesses by, say, the end of Thursday.
We have an amendment here which says that we have one full meeting.
This is extraordinary. We haven't even had this. We aren't even in possession of this bill yet. It hasn't completed debate in the House. It hasn't been voted on in the House. I don't know if either of these motions are in order in view of that fact.
Well, I think that we have
willing to work on that basis in an accommodating fashion.
Yes.
But certainly.
But let us imagine that the bill passes, and so we need
yes,
to.
But
because of
I'm doing it on that basis.
Good.
But were my amendment not to pass, I would argue that neither of these motions, that this motion is simply not in order, as we don't have carriage of the bill.
Perhaps, but I think the discussion here, given the nature of the mover of the bill, given the situation, I think we need to prepare for all contingencies, and this is a contingency motion.
And
so to speak.
well, this is more than a contingency motion. The motion before us is one of not allowing anybody to speak to it. From outside this committee.
Doesn't say that. The motion just says that the committee will devote 1 hour to discuss Bill 210 on Thursday.
No.
Now, you're suggesting that we move that, an amendment, and we're discussing your amendment here, that we have one full meeting to discuss this bill. And you are suggesting that during that full meeting that we have witnesses. Now, let us entertain one full meeting with witnesses as the amendment that will therefore read...
With witnesses' names to be provided by the end of Thursday.
So it means we will not be discussing this bill on Thursday?
Well, we could discuss it on Thursday if people wish, but I don't see how we can get witnesses here for Thursday. We don't even have a bill in front of us yet.
Yes. All right. So let us entertain Mr. Van Loon's amendment, which basically says that we will have one full meeting with witnesses to discuss Bill 210, and that it may not necessarily be on Thursday if we're going to have the list of witnesses on Thursday. We're discussing this amendment now, not the whole bill. So, Mr. Nantel.
I wanted to speak on the proposition by Mr. Van Dal, not on Mr. Van Loon's.
All right. So anyone wish to speak on Mr. Van Loon's motion? Yes, Mr. Van Dal.
No, I would just call the question.
I just want you to also be aware that we cannot, if witnesses wish to come at committee, we cannot force a question. We have to allow them to come. And so basically, this is even moot, the discussion of whether we have witnesses or not. If people say that they wish to come to a committee and discuss a bill, that is part of what the committees are supposed to do. So being aware of that, we move. The motion, therefore, is the amendment is 2 hours to discuss Bill 210, and that the list of witnesses be given by Thursday at the end of business day. Now, those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? The amendment does not carry, and so we are back to the original motion from Mr. Van Dal, which says that 1 hour to discuss Bill 210 on Thursday.
Madam Chair, I would move that this motion is not in order. The bill is not before us at this point in time. We are not in a position to know that it will be before us, and as such, I would say that this motion is premature and is not in order for us to vote on at this time without the unanimous consent of this committee.
Mr. Bussen?
Madam Chair, This is a procedural question about how we're going to allocate our time, and that is squarely between us. We're not disposing of how we would handle this bill. We're not discussing the substance of the bill. We are only discussing committee time, and that's a question of process, and so it is properly before us. Thank you.
Yes, anyone wishes to speak to this? That's fine. Then, Mr. Van Loan, you wanted to respond very quickly?
It's not a matter of mere process, it's mere process for something for which we don't have carriage of yet. There has been no reference from the House of Commons. As such, we are absent jurisdiction. We could make procedural decisions on it if we wish to, through unanimous consent, but and agree to all respect that, but that would require unanimous consent. And absent that, in the absence of the bill being before us, and the absence of a reference from the House of Commons, we have no capacity at this point in time to deal with that. I tried to, in good faith, put forward what I thought was a reasonable, very, very modest proposal for one meeting with witnesses. And, you know, we're talking less than 48 hours to put those together. That's hardly unreasonable. That was rejected. And with that kind of heavy-handed approach and the prospect of 1 hour with no witnesses to deal with the whole matter in camera on something that isn't even before us, for which we do not have reference, I have no choice but to point out the fact that we don't have jurisdiction to deal with it, as there is no reference to this committee from the House of Commons, and any such decision from us is moot in those circumstances.
Quickly, Mr. Nantel, and then I think because we need unanimous consent to proceed with even the procedural component of this, I will ask Mr. Nantel to speak, and then I will ask for unanimous consent.
Je pense que Monsieur Van Loan.
I think that Mr. Van Loan, like everybody here, wants this to go well. I think that no one wants to make this situation more complicated. If we state things clearly, what Mr. Van Loan is saying, this isn't really kosher, we're going a little too quickly. I want to make my case. I want 2 hours with witnesses. If that's the deal, let's make it very clear. If you're ready to say, look, we'll do it, but I want to work out a deal, let's do so. Because there's a degree of sincerity from Mr. Van Loan. There's sincerity for Mr. Bélanger with regards to this bill. We should not get lost in the details. Let's act quickly so that we don't look like a gang of people who are just getting caught up in the details.
I will now, because this, we do have a consideration that this motion, as it stands, saying that we should have 1 hour to discuss Bill 210, is out of order, and I agree with Mr. Van Loan. Do we have unanimous consent to deal with this motion? If not, I would like to suggest that we amend that motion to say that in the event of the adoption on Thursday of Bill 210, we would be able to consider this bill and report it to the House on Friday.
Madame Présidente, how about if we I'm just throwing something at the table to try to respond to Van Loan's point. How about if we have an hour, the first hour on Thursday focused on witnesses, and the second hour our business? That way there we would have, it wouldn't be 2 full hours, but I think an hour would be at least a compromise that would make this work, because we do need to act as quickly as we can on this issue. Thank you.
The language is going to have to say, in the event of the passage of this bill in the House on Thursday. This has to be part of what we will consider if it is to be in order. I just wanted you to know that. So, Mr. Bruson, and we need to leave because we're running out of time.
I was just going to propose, as a friendly amendment, that perhaps what we could do is 1 hour of witnesses followed by 1 hour of, I was going to say clause by clause, but it's clause, on Thursday.
Again, this has to be, the motion is going to have to read that in the event of this bill's passage in the House on tomorrow. Is it today? Today, that the House deal with this on Thursday. Now, Mr. Van Loan, I think what people are suggesting is that since it would seem to me from everyone else's vote that you may be the only person with a list of witnesses, could you get that to us if this passes so that we can deal with it on Thursday?
On such short notice, I don't believe that's reasonable. I don't believe that's practical.
Right,
we don't have a reference before us. I think I put forward what was a very reasonable and modest suggestion. I am not asking for anything unreasonable. One meeting, and witnesses at the end of Wednesday, is very reasonable. I don't think even in the modified form, and I will again say the modified form of this amendment is not proper because we do not have a reference before us. And we are making decisions on something over which we do not have a reference and don't have carriage of, and that would require unanimous consent. I simply can't accept that even the amended motion would be in order.
Now, I will ask the clerk to rule on Mr. Van Loan's suggestion that even the amended motion, which says in the event of, that would not be in order. Perhaps the clerk can rule on this.
Second. On est toujours ici? Vous êtes encore là, vous autres?
Yes, I think the clerk is saying that it is in order to suggest that in the event of adoption of the motion in the House, we'll make the motion, actually we'll put this in order, and that we need to call the vote on it now because we must leave this room. And so I will ask for the vote of in the event of...
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I would like to... I can challenge the ruling.
Challenge the chair,
I have every right to challenge the ruling on a point of order, and I don't believe that it is appropriate. I don't believe that we do have jurisdiction to make such a ruling through the words that have been added on something for which we don't have a reference. We could make such a decision through unanimous consent, through a suspension of our rules, but we do not have a reference here. It's not, the House of Commons has not given us jurisdiction over this at this point in time. And we don't know what the House of Commons will give us jurisdiction over, if they will give us anything. And as such, while we might be able to, on a consensus basis, set a path, I challenge the ruling that this revised motion is in order. It simply is not.
Est-ce que je peux demander un point d'ordre? J'ai un point d'ordre.
I have a point of order.
Challenging the chair, and I would suggest that this committee has quite often discussed future business of the committee on such a basis as we do not know, but in the event that this is so, we will now put 3 days to discuss a motion that may not even have been accepted by this committee. So I will...
Mon point d'ordre peut aider.
Point of order might help. Thank you very much. What if we just did a study without doing clause by clause? What if we just set aside 2 hours with witnesses to study? No conclusion to be drawn because time is passing. We could move forward, and then we could ask the analysts to look at what we did in our study and apply that.
Put that in motion? Yes. Absolutely. I move that we...
Simply study.
Well, we have a motion that you are suggesting that you amend completely. Is that it?
That is true,
Yes.
because what my concern is that we want this to happen. Let's find a compromise.
Yes.
Let's not be too picky
All
on
right.
this.
So you are therefore moving that an amendment to the motion that was made that says in the event of adoption of Bill 210, and you are just suggesting
I'm suggesting that we study the case, that
we just
listen
study
to...
Bill 210.
Absolutely, that
Yes.
we receive witnesses.
Yes.
For now.
Excuse me, we have a vote. We have a motion on the floor from, is it Mr. Nantel, that suggests that the chairs... Mr. Van Loon. No, Mr. Van Loon did not say that the chair's ruling be sustained.
That's the form to
Yes.
do it?
Yes.
He is challenging your decision.
Yes, I know.
That's the form.
Yes, Mr. Sampson. We have to deal with this. How do we
With the
deal with
chair's
it?
ruling.
Yes.
But
to vote on that, the term, that the statement that under Mr. Van Loan's challenge. We're going to vote on a motion that suggests that the chair's ruling be sustained. I'm going to call the question. Yes. No, there's no debate on this because the chair is suggesting that we do not accept Mr. Van Loan's challenge, and in fact that the chair's ruling be sustained. I will call the question. There is no debate on this.
Just to be clear,
yes.
Since this was a challenge of the chair, a yes vote sustains the ruling of the chair and a no vote overturns the ruling of the chair.
Yes,
okay.
indeed.
Thank you very much.
So we will now be voting on that motion that the chair's ruling be sustained. Those in favour? Those opposed? The chair's ruling is sustained, and now we will actually go back to the motion that suggests that in the event of the adoption of G20, that this committee study the report or the bill in the House on Thursday. Sorry, in this committee on Thursday.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I wanted some clarification on what happened to Mr. Nantel's motion or suggestion. This seems to have evaporated.
Well, excuse me.
Are we doing Mr. Nantel's here, or are we doing the previous motion?
No, excuse me. The motion is on the floor, and you have challenged. Mr. Van Loan has challenged it. The motion, the chair's ruling is sustained. So we will have to deal with the motion that was originally on the floor that Mr. Van Loan challenged.
Could you please read the motion?
Read the motion. That motion is that in the event of the adoption on Thursday of the adoption of Bill C-20, that this will be dealt with by this committee on Thursday and be reported to the House on Friday.
Good. Yeah.
Yes, C-210.
Yeah.
Those in favour?
Madam Chair, I would like to speak to this motion.
Yes, you have Mr. Van Loan, and
no,
you have been overruled.
Madam Chair, you cannot limit my right to speak to this.
Go ahead.
With the greatest of respect.
Yes.
This is a matter of a review of Canada's national anthem, and I appreciate the difficulty of Mr. Bélanger's circumstances. But with the greatest of respect, this is not Mr. Bélanger's national anthem. It is a national anthem that is sung every day by millions of Canadians. We know from the efforts of my involvement in our previous government when suggestions were made to change the wording of this national anthem, when that occurred, that the response from the public was very, very strong. People, thousands of Canadians, had views. Hundreds of my constituents had views that were different from those of our government. These were views that if I could continue, that this national anthem mattered a great deal to them, that they did not support the proposal that came from our government to change the wording. What we learned from that experience is that trying to manage a situation like this in a top-down, non-democratic fashion is a dangerous thing to do. It lacks legitimacy, and for a change like this to one of Canada's major national symbols, for a change like this to our national anthem, it is very important that there at least be the most basic, and I'm not asking for a lot, I'm asking for the most basic.
You have asked for this. You are repeating what you originally said.
No, I am not repeating. I'm continuing.
I just want to say that on a point of order, we have now 15 minutes
that would like to appear here
into another committee's time.
Well, I regret that, but...
And that is a point of order because the business of the day has to be carried on by the other
committee.
Well,
I have not finished, and I have the chair with the respect, Madam Chair.
Well, Mr. Van Loan, do I take it that you are actually filibustering this
I'm not
meeting?
Filibustering. I'm attempting to explain why I think it's important.
And we have heard that.
The member's repeating himself. Can we call the question?
And I am speaking to that motion.
Again and again and again. It's repetition, Madam Chair.
The chair is suggesting that we have heard Mr. Van Loan.
Well,
we have heard him speak.
I have not
you
finished.
Are repeating yourself, Mr. Van Loan.
I am not. I would like to discuss the witnesses that I would like to bring.
Would you like to give us the names of those witnesses now?
I would like to.
Madam Chair, he's repeating. We've heard from him. Can we move on to the question?
Mr.
We're still in the process. And, you know,
Mr. Van Loon, with all due respect, I would like you to submit those witnesses now, if you have them, and we shall call the question on this. This question does not have anything to do with witnesses currently. The motion on the floor has no mention of witnesses. Your motion, or your original challenge to the chair, was actually voted against, and the chair's this motion is on the table, and I'm calling the vote now. And you can give us the motion, your list of witnesses afterwards.
Madam Chair, no.
Those in favour?
I would like to continue to discuss this. You cannot have a vote while I have the floor. You cannot have a vote in the middle of my comments on this.
I am
and
ruling
the fact
you out
is,
of order, Mr. Van
Well,
Loon.
you may rule me out of order, but that's entirely inappropriate. You are shutting down a democratic process on something about Canada's national symbols. You are shutting down a democratic process, Madam Chair, on something that is significant to millions of people, and the consequence of your doing this is not just to deny
Madam Chair?
my right to speak here. The consequence is to deny the right of other Canadians who care about their symbols the opportunity to have their perspective heard. There is no legitimacy in a process where they cannot be heard.
Mr. Van Loon, on a point of order, you have continued to make the same point. Everyone has heard you and voted you down on this issue.
Madam Chair, you said we have a right to bring witnesses. You said this committee cannot proceed without hearing witnesses, and now we have before us a motion that contemplates the impossibility.
Madam Chair, we heard the member. We voted him down.
The motion does not discuss witnesses. The motion is for a 2-hour listening, and witnesses will come.
No, it was not 2 hours. It was 1 hour.
If you, Mr. Van Loon, have a list of witnesses, please give it to us so that we can invite those witnesses to be here if this continues.
Madam Chair, I have people with whom we have been having discussions. You cannot call.
Question. Those in favour of the motion on the floor? Those opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried, and this.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.